Number 1. It began in chaos, under fire, on beaches that became prisons, May 26 to the 4th of June, 1940. Over 338,000 Allied soldiers were trapped on the coast of France with the German army closing in. No one expected more than 30,000 to escape. Nearly everyone did. Number 2. The disaster started 3 weeks earlier. On the 10th of May 1940, Germany launched Fall Gelb, Case Yellow, invading France, Belgium and the Netherlands, simultaneously with 141 divisions. The Allies had expected a repeat of World War I. They got blitzkrieg instead. Number 3. German forces broke through the Ardennes forest, a region French military planners considered impassable for tanks. Panzer divisions crossed the Meuse River at Sedan on May 13, smashing through French defences that were supposed to be impregnable. The French line collapsed in 48 hours. Number 4. General Heinz Guderian's panzers raced 250 miles to the English Channel in 7 days, cutting off the British Expeditionary Force, BEF, and French First Army from the rest of France. By May 20, German forces reached the coast at Abbeville. 400,000 Allied soldiers were trapped in a shrinking pocket. Number 5. The British Expeditionary Force numbered 394,165 men in France. They had been sent to defend Belgium and northern France. Now they were surrounded on 3 sides with their backs to the sea. Retreat to the south was impossible. The only escape was east, toward England, across 26 miles of English Channel. Number 6. Lord Gort, commander of the BEF, realised the situation was hopeless by May 19. Against orders from the French High Command to continue attacking southward, he made the decision to retreat to Dunkirk. This decision saved the British Army but infuriated the French, who felt abandoned. Number 7. Dunkirk was not an ideal evacuation point. The port could handle only limited traffic. The harbour entrance was narrow and vulnerable to bombing. The beaches were flat and shallow, unsuitable for large ships. At low tide, the water was too shallow for 100 yards from shore. Soldiers would have to wade through chest-deep water to reach boats. Number 8. Operation Dynamo, the code name for the evacuation, officially began at 6:57 p.m. on the 26th of May 1940. The operation was named after the Dynamo room in the Dover Naval Headquarters, where Vice Admiral Bertram Ramsay planned it. Ramsay initially estimated he could save 45,000 men in 2 days before the Germans overran the port. Number 9. The Dunkirk perimeter was defended by 40,000 French troops who held the line while the evacuation proceeded. They fought German forces at Lille, Cassel and along canal defences. Some units held their positions for days after being cut off, buying time for soldiers on the beaches. Many of these defenders were killed or captured. Number 10. On May 24, Hitler issued the Halt Order, stopping German panzer divisions just 10 miles from Dunkirk. The order remains one of the most controversial decisions of World War II. For 3 days, German ground forces did not advance. Those 3 days allowed the British to establish a defensive perimeter. Number 11. The Halt Order had multiple causes. Generals Gerd von Rundstedt and Gunther von Kluge warned that the panzers had outrun their supply lines and infantry support. The terrain around Dunkirk was marshy and crisscrossed with canals, poor tank country. Hermann Göring convinced Hitler that the Luftwaffe alone could destroy the trapped army. Number 12. Göring told Hitler, "Only fishing boats are escaping. I'll guarantee that nothing gets across the channel except fish." He was catastrophically wrong. His promise would become one of the most significant failures of the German Air Force. Number 13. The Luftwaffe launched massive bombing raids on Dunkirk, beginning May 27. Stuka dive bombers attacked the port facilities, sinking ships and setting the town ablaze. Oil storage tanks exploded, creating pillars of black smoke visible from England. The bombing destroyed much of the town but failed to stop the evacuation. Number 14. The Royal Air Force flew 2,739 sorties over Dunkirk during the 9 days of evacuation. Spitfires and Hurricanes engaged Luftwaffe bombers and fighters in constant air battles. RAF pilots flew up to 4 missions per day. The fighting was so intense that some squadrons lost over 50% of their aircraft. Number 15. RAF Fighter Command operated at the limit of its range. Fighters could spend only 20 to 40 minutes over Dunkirk before having to return to England to refuel. This meant the beaches were often undefended. Soldiers on the ground rarely saw British planes and accused the RAF of abandoning them. The accusation was unfair but widely believed. Number 16. The Luftwaffe lost 240 aircraft over Dunkirk. The RAF lost 177. German losses included experienced pilots who couldn't be easily replaced. British losses were equally painful, but the RAF learned critical lessons about fighter tactics that would prove essential 3 months later during the Battle of Britain. Number 17. The first soldiers evacuated on May 27 were taken off by destroyers at Dunkirk harbour. Only 7,669 men were rescued that day. The pace was far too slow. At this rate, only a fraction of the army would escape before the Germans broke through. Number 18. The Admiralty issued a call for small boats on May 27. Boat owners along the southern coast of England were asked to report any vessel over 30 feet in length capable of navigating the channel. The response was immediate. Within 48 hours, hundreds of boats were requisitioned. Number 19. The little ships were a chaotic mix. Fishing boats, pleasure yachts, lifeboats, Thames barges, ferries, tugboats and private motorboats. Some were sailed by their civilian owners. Most were crewed by Royal Navy personnel. Together they numbered approximately 700 vessels. Number 20. The little ships couldn't carry soldiers all the way to England. Most were too small and slow. Their job was to ferry men from the beaches to larger ships waiting offshore. They shuttled back and forth under fire, making dozens of trips. Some boats carried 10 men at a time, others carried 50. Number 21. The East Mole, a concrete breakwater extending 1,400 yards into the sea, became the primary evacuation point. It was designed as a breakwater, not a pier, with a narrow wooden walkway on top. Destroyers and passenger ferries tied up alongside it, and soldiers filed aboard single file. At peak efficiency, 2,000 men per hour boarded ships at the Mole. Number 22. Captain William Tennant was put in charge of the evacuation from the beaches. He arrived on May 27 expecting chaos and found it. Tens of thousands of soldiers were scattered across the beaches with no organisation. Tennant established order, set up queuing systems and prioritised loading at the East Mole instead of the beaches. Number 23. Soldiers waited in long lines called queues extending into the sea. They stood in water up to their chests for hours, sometimes a full day, waiting for boats. Some drowned when they were too exhausted to keep their heads above water. Others were killed by strafing Luftwaffe fighters while standing helplessly in the water. Number 24. Discipline held remarkably well. Despite exhaustion, hunger and fear, most soldiers waited their turn. Officers maintained order. There were isolated incidents of panic, but mass chaos never occurred. British military discipline, drilled through years of training, kept the evacuation from collapsing into a stampede. Number 25. French soldiers were initially not evacuated. British ships prioritised British troops. On May 29, Churchill ordered that French and British soldiers be evacuated in equal numbers. The order was often ignored. Of the 338,226 men evacuated, 139,997 were French, approximately 40%. Many French soldiers felt betrayed. Number 26. The destroyer HMS Wakeful was torpedoed by a German E-boat on the night of May 29. She sank in 15 seconds. Of the 640 soldiers aboard, only 25 survived. Many were trapped below deck. Others were pulled underwater by the suction of the sinking ship. It was the single deadliest loss during the evacuation. Number 27. The paddle steamer Crested Eagle was bombed and set on fire on May 29 while loaded with 600 soldiers. The crew beached her on the shore to allow soldiers to escape. Over 300 men burned to death or drowned. Survivors jumped into the sea and swam through burning oil. The wreck burned for 2 days. Number 28. The destroyer HMS Grafton was torpedoed on May 29 while rescuing survivors from the Wakeful. She lost 35 crew members but remained afloat long enough for most soldiers aboard to be transferred to other ships. She was sunk later by another torpedo. Her captain survived and commanded a destroyer at D-Day 4 years later. Number 29. 6 British destroyers were sunk during the evacuation. 19 were damaged. Over 2,000 naval personnel died. Destroyers were the workhorses of Dynamo, capable of carrying 900 men per trip and making the crossing to Dover in 2 hours. Their loss was painful, but they evacuated over 100,000 soldiers. Number 30. The personnel ship Lancastria was sunk on June 17, 2 weeks after Dunkirk, during evacuations from western France. She was bombed while overloaded with soldiers and refugees. Between 4,000 and 6,500 people died, the worst maritime disaster in British history. Churchill suppressed the news to avoid damaging morale. Number 31. The beaches at Dunkirk stretched for 10 miles from Dunkirk harbour to La Panne on the Belgian border. Bray Dunes and Malo-les-Bains became the primary beach evacuation points. The sand was soft and flat. Vehicles sank to their axles. Makeshift piers were built using abandoned trucks driven into the sea at low tide. Number 32. Soldiers built improvised jetties by driving trucks and lorries into the water, then laying planks across them. These lorry piers allowed boats to get closer to shore. Some structures extended 100 yards into the sea. They were crude, unstable, and constantly repaired, but they worked. Number 33. The weather was miraculously calm for most of the evacuation. The English Channel is notoriously rough, but from May 27 to June 2, the sea remained unusually flat. This allowed small boats to make the crossing safely. On June 1, the weather turned. High winds and rough seas reduced rescue operations by 50%. Number 34. Over 40,000 vehicles were abandoned on the beaches and in the town of Dunkirk. Tanks, trucks, artillery pieces, motorcycles and staff cars were disabled and left behind. Soldiers smashed engines, slashed tyres and poured sand into fuel tanks to render them useless to the Germans. The loss of equipment was staggering. Number 35. The British Expeditionary Force abandoned 2,472 artillery pieces, 63,879 vehicles, 76,097 tons of ammunition and 416,000 tons of stores and supplies. Britain's army escaped, but its equipment did not. Rebuilding would take years. Britain had soldiers but nothing to arm them with. Number 36. Soldiers were ordered to leave their rifles behind to save weight and speed up boarding. Many refused. They carried their weapons into the boats, clinging to them even in the water. Some weapons were thrown overboard to make room for more men. Rifles littered the seafloor for decades. Number 37. Captain Harold Marcus Irvine Andrews commanded a company of the East Lancashire Regiment covering the retreat to the beaches. On May 31, June 1, his unit held a position against repeated German attacks. Irvine Andrews personally operated a Bren gun, killing at least 17 German soldiers and holding the line long enough for his men to evacuate. He was awarded the Victoria Cross and survived the war. Number 38. Sergeant Major George Gristock remained behind with a small group to cover the final evacuation. On June 2, surrounded and out of ammunition, he led a bayonet charge against German machine gun positions. He was killed, but his action allowed the last boats to leave. He was awarded the Victoria Cross posthumously. Number 39. Private Frederick William Holmes was part of the 2nd Battalion King's Shropshire Light Infantry. On May 29, he held a position at a canal bridge for 4 hours against overwhelming German forces. He was wounded twice, but refused evacuation. He covered his unit's retreat and was captured. He survived the war in a POW camp and received the military medal. Number 40. Wounded soldiers posed a terrible dilemma. They required stretchers, medical personnel, and space aboard ships. Loading them took longer. Some commanders prioritized able-bodied men who could return to combat. Others refused to leave the wounded. Thousands of wounded were evacuated, but many were left behind in field hospitals and captured. Number 41. The Dunkirk perimeter shrank daily as German forces advanced. By June 1, the defensive line was only 3 miles from the beaches. Artillery shells landed on the sand. Soldiers could hear small arms fire in the town. Time was running out. Number 42. The final night of evacuation, June 3 to 4, was reserved for French rearguard troops who had held the perimeter. Over 26,000 French soldiers were evacuated on the last night. At 3:40 a.m. on June 4, the last British ship, HMS Shikari, left Dunkirk harbour. German forces entered the town at dawn. Number 43. Approximately 30,000 to 40,000 French soldiers remained in Dunkirk after the last ships departed. They surrendered on June 4. They had held the perimeter to the end, allowing their British allies to escape. Many felt abandoned. They spent the rest of the war in German POW camps. Number 44. The total number of men evacuated was 338,226. This included 198,229 British, 139,997 French, and a small number of Belgian and Polish troops. The Admiralty's initial estimate had been 45,000. The actual number was more than 7 times higher. Number 45. The evacuation succeeded beyond all expectations, but it was still a military disaster. Britain had lost its only trained army. France would surrender 3 weeks later. Britain stood alone against Nazi Germany with no allies and a defeated military. The soldiers were saved, but the strategic situation was catastrophic. Number 46. Winston Churchill addressed Parliament on the 4th of June 1940, the day the evacuation ended. His speech acknowledged the military defeat but rallied the nation. He stated, "We must be very careful not to assign to this deliverance the attributes of a victory. Wars are not won by evacuations." Then he promised, "We shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing grounds, we shall never surrender." Number 47. The phrase Dunkirk Spirit entered the English language, meaning perseverance and solidarity in the face of adversity. It became a defining element of British identity during World War II. The mythology of Dunkirk, the little ships, the calm seas, the miraculous escape, became a source of national pride. Number 48. The propaganda value of Dunkirk was immense. The British government and press portrayed it as a triumph of organisation, courage and national unity. Newspapers celebrated the miracle of deliverance. The truth was more complex, but the narrative was necessary. Britain needed hope. Number 49. German propaganda called Dunkirk a great victory. Newsreels showed captured equipment and prisoners. Göring claimed the Luftwaffe had destroyed the British army. German newspapers mocked the inglorious flight. But privately, German commanders knew 338,000 enemy soldiers had escaped to fight another day. Number 50. Many German officers considered the Halt Order a catastrophic mistake. General Günther Blumentritt later wrote, "We watched the ships come in and take away the British troops. We could do nothing about it. It was infuriating." Hitler's decision to halt the panzers remains one of the great what-ifs of World War II. Number 51. The little ships that participated in Dynamo became legends. The Tamzin, a 14-foot fishing boat, made multiple trips carrying soldiers. The Sundowner, a 58-foot yacht, rescued 130 men. The Medway Queen, a paddle steamer, made 7 trips and evacuated 7,000 soldiers while shooting down 3 German aircraft with Lewis guns mounted on her deck. Number 52. Not all little ships were operated by civilians. Many were crewed by Royal Navy sailors who had been hastily assigned to requisitioned boats. Some civilian boat owners did sail to Dunkirk. Their courage was real, but the majority of small boats were under military control. The popular image of weekend sailors rescuing the army is partly myth. Number 53. The little ship Sundowner survives today and is maintained by the Sundowner Trust. She is moored on the River Medway in Kent and participates in annual commemorations. Over 40 Dunkirk little ships still exist, lovingly restored and maintained by private owners and preservation societies. Number 54. Soldiers returning to England were given food, tea and cigarettes. Trains transported them to camps across southern England. Many expected to be met with anger or shame for the defeat. Instead, they were greeted as heroes. Crowds gathered at train stations cheering and waving flags. The reception stunned many veterans. Number 55. One soldier, Corporal Charles Searle of the Royal Engineers, wrote in his diary, "Arrived Dover 3 a.m, given tea and sandwiches. People were wonderful. I thought they'd be ashamed of us. They treated us like we'd won." The public's response helped transform Dunkirk from a defeat into a symbol of resilience. Number 56. Soldiers who returned from Dunkirk were given 7 days' leave. Many were too exhausted to celebrate. Some slept for 24 hours straight, others couldn't sleep, haunted by what they'd seen. Post-traumatic stress was not formally recognised, and soldiers were expected to recover quickly and return to duty. Number 57. The British Army immediately began rebuilding. Equipment was scraped together from training depots, museums and even private collections. American supplies arrived under the Destroyers for Bases Agreement. By late 1940, Britain had re-equipped enough divisions to defend against invasion. The soldiers saved at Dunkirk formed the core of this rebuilt army. Number 58. Canadian forces arrived in Britain in August 1940 to reinforce defences. Australian and New Zealand divisions followed. Free French, Polish and Czechoslovak forces contributed troops. The Commonwealth rallied to Britain's defence. Without the soldiers evacuated from Dunkirk, there would have been no one to build an army around. Number 59. Over 1,000 civilians in small boats participated in some capacity during the evacuation. Some made single trips, others made multiple crossings. Fishermen, ferry operators, yacht owners and Thames barge captains all contributed. Their role, while sometimes exaggerated, was real and significant. Number 60. The Thames barge Glenway, operated by skipper Arthur Dench, made 3 trips to Dunkirk. On her first trip she carried ammunition to British forces. On her second and third trips she brought back soldiers. Dench and his crew worked without sleep for 48 hours. Dench was later awarded the Distinguished Service Medal, number 61. Frank Hancock, a 19-year-old Thames barge mate, sailed on the MTB 107, a motor torpedo boat, to Dunkirk. He helped evacuate soldiers under constant bombing. He later said, "I was terrified the whole time. Anyone who says they weren't scared is lying." He made 2 trips and survived. He died in 2014 at age 93, number 62. The youngest person known to have participated in the evacuation was 4-year-old Sea Scout Jimmy Corbin, who crewed on a small boat used to ferry soldiers to larger ships. He lied about his age to participate. His mother discovered the truth when he returned home exhausted and covered in oil. She was furious. He was unrepentant. Number 63. Nurses and medical personnel evacuated wounded soldiers throughout Dynamo. Nurse Joan Roper was aboard the hospital ship Isle of Guernsey when it was bombed on May 29. The ship burned, but stayed afloat long enough for all patients to be transferred. Roper helped carry stretchers while the ship was on fire. She survived and continued nursing throughout the war. Number 64. French General Robert Fagalde commanded the defence of Dunkirk itself. His forces held the town against German attacks while the evacuation proceeded. On June 3, he was ordered to evacuate. He refused, saying, "A general commanding a fortified position does not leave." He finally boarded the last ship under direct orders. He survived the war. Number 65. Dogs accompanied soldiers to Dunkirk. Some were mascots, others were working dogs. Many were shot or left behind because there was no room on the boats. A few were smuggled aboard, hidden in coats or packs. One terrier named Bing crossed the channel 3 times, accompanying his owner on each trip. Number 66. Looting occurred in Dunkirk as discipline broke down among some units. Shops were broken into. Wine cellars were emptied. Some soldiers got drunk waiting for evacuation. Officers shot a few looters to restore order. Most soldiers remained disciplined, but desperation led to isolated incidents of chaos. Number 67. German prisoners of war were captured during the retreat and brought to England. Approximately 200 German soldiers, mostly Luftwaffe pilots shot down over France, were evacuated alongside British troops. They spent the rest of the war in British POW camps. Some expressed surprise at being rescued by their enemies. Number 68. The evacuation beaches became graveyards. Bodies washed ashore for weeks. French authorities buried them in mass graves. After the war, the Commonwealth War Graves Commission exhumed and reinterred many in formal cemeteries. The Dunkirk Memorial commemorates 4,500 soldiers with no known grave. Number 69. Civilian casualties in Dunkirk town numbered approximately 1,000. Most were killed in Luftwaffe bombing raids. The town's population had largely evacuated before the battle, but some residents remained. They hid in cellars and shelters while their town burned above them. Number 70. The Dunkirk evacuation was kept secret from the British public for several days. News blackouts prevented reporting until May 31. When the story finally broke, newspapers were flooded with accounts. The BBC broadcast appeals for boat owners. The public response was overwhelming. Donations, volunteers and support poured in. Number 71. King George VI visited returning soldiers at Dover on May 31. He inspected units, spoke with officers and thanked troops personally. His presence boosted morale. Soldiers wrote home describing the King's visit as a highlight that made them feel valued despite the defeat. Number 72. The novelist J.B. Priestley broadcast a famous radio talk on June 5 about the Dunkirk little ships. He described the Great Fleet of Tate, noon, little boats, and praised the ordinary people who answered the call. His broadcast was heard by millions and solidified the Dunkirk narrative in public consciousness. His words shaped how Britain remembered the evacuation. Number 73. Dunkirk veteran Captain Ian English, who commanded a company in the Royal Warwickshire Regiment, returned to Dunkirk every year for 60 years to honour fallen comrades. He walked the beaches, laid wreaths, and spoke at ceremonies. He made his final visit in 2000 at age 87. He died in 2004. Number 74. Brigadier William Gough commanded the 1st Battalion Irish Guards during the retreat to Dunkirk. His unit fought a rearguard action at Furnes, Belgium, holding off German forces for 12 hours. Gough was wounded but refused evacuation. He remained with his men and was among the last to board ships on June 2. He survived and commanded forces in North Africa. Number 75. The Belgian army surrendered on May 28, opening the eastern flank of the Dunkirk perimeter. King Leopold III surrendered against the advice of his government, which fled to London. Belgian troops had fought courageously, but the situation was hopeless. Their surrender forced British forces to extend their defensive lines. Number 76. Approximately 68,000 British soldiers were captured during the Battle of France, including the fall of Dunkirk. They spent the next 5 years in German POW camps. Most survived the war, though conditions were harsh. Officers were treated reasonably well under the Geneva Convention. Enlisted men faced forced labour. Number 77. The Luftwaffe dropped 15,000 tons of bombs on Dunkirk and the surrounding area during the evacuation. Despite this massive bombardment, the evacuation succeeded. Bombs on soft sand created craters, but often failed to detonate or caused less fragmentation than expected. Hard surfaces would have multiplied casualties. Number 78. Soldiers constructed makeshift shelters in the sand dunes. They dug foxholes and covered them with planks scavenged from destroyed buildings. These shelters provided minimal protection from shrapnel and strafing. Men huddled together during bombing raids, waiting for the next wave of attacks. Number 79. Exhaustion killed as surely as bullets. Soldiers had marched for days with little food or sleep. Some collapsed on the beaches and couldn't be roused. Others fell asleep standing in queues and drowned when the tide came in. Medical officers estimated that 10–15% of soldiers evacuated required immediate hospitalization for exhaustion. Number 80. The sight of Spitfires overhead became a symbol of hope for soldiers on the beaches. When RAF fighters appeared, soldiers cheered. When they left or were absent, morale plummeted. The relationship between ground troops and airmen was strained by misunderstanding, but both groups were fighting the same desperate battle. Number 81. Radio communication between ships, shore and Dover was inconsistent. Messages were delayed or lost. Captains made independent decisions based on what they observed. The lack of reliable communication created confusion, but also forced initiative and improvisation that proved effective. Number 82. Dunkirk was the first major test of the Spitfire in combat. The fighter proved superior to German Me, 109 seconds in turning radius and maneuverability at lower altitudes. Pilots learned vital lessons about tactics, ammunition, conservation and formation flying. These lessons saved lives during the Battle of Britain 3 months later. Number 83. German E-boats, fast attack craft, prowled the channel nightly, attacking evacuation ships with torpedoes and gunfire. They sank several vessels but couldn't stop the evacuation. British destroyers and motor torpedo boats engaged them in running gun battles. The E-boat threat forced most evacuations to occur during daylight, increasing vulnerability to air attack. Number 84. Over 220 ships of all types were sunk or damaged during Operation Dynamo. The losses included 6 destroyers, 56 smaller naval vessels, over 40 minesweepers, and more than 100 merchant and civilian boats. The human cost among sailors and boat crews was high. Over 3,500 naval and merchant marine personnel died. Number 85. The myth of Dunkirk sometimes overshadowed the sacrifice of French forces. French soldiers continued fighting in France for 3 more weeks after Dunkirk. Over 90,000 French soldiers died in May and June 1940. Their resistance delayed German forces and bought time for evacuations, but French contributions were often overlooked in British accounts. Number 86. After returning to England, many French soldiers requested to return to France to continue fighting. Some joined Charles de Gaulle's Free French Forces in London. Others were repatriated to France under a Franco-British agreement. After France's surrender on June 22, French soldiers in Britain faced the choice of staying or returning to occupied France. Number 87. The evacuation's success depended on the Royal Navy's organisation. Admiral Ramsay established ship lanes across the Channel, Route Y, 87 miles, Route X, 55 miles but vulnerable to shore batteries, and Route Z, the longest but safest. Strict traffic control prevented collisions and ensured a constant flow of ships to and from Dunkirk. Number 88. Dunkirk tested the resolve of British leadership. Churchill was Prime Minister for less than 3 weeks when the evacuation began. His government faced pressure from defeatists who wanted to negotiate with Hitler. The successful evacuation strengthened Churchill's position and silenced calls for peace negotiations. Number 89. The evacuation demonstrated the value of radar. British chain-home radar stations detected incoming Luftwaffe raids and vectored RAF fighters to intercept them. Though radar was primitive, it provided crucial early warning and force multiplication. German commanders underestimated the impact of radar. That underestimation would cost them dearly in the Battle of Britain. Number 90. Dunkirk veterans formed the core of Montgomery's 8th Army in North Africa, the forces that defended Britain in 1940 to 1941 and the armies that invaded Normandy in 1944. Private Frederick Charles Pearson fought at Dunkirk, then at El Alamein, then landed on D-Day. He survived the entire war. Thousands followed similar paths. Number 91. The German army reached Paris on the 14th of June 1940, 10 days after Dunkirk fell. France surrendered on June 22. The armistice was signed in the same railway car where Germany had surrendered in 1918. Hitler attended personally. The Battle of France cost France 90,000 dead, 200,000 wounded, and 1.9 million captured. Britain's evacuation looked prescient in hindsight. Number 92. British propaganda films about Dunkirk were released as early as 1942. The film Next of Kin included Dunkirk footage. The 1958 film Dunkirk, starring John Mills, became the definitive British account for a generation. Christopher Nolan's 2017 film Dunkirk introduced the story to modern audiences worldwide. Number 93. Veterans of Dunkirk held annual reunions for decades. The Dunkirk Veterans Association was formed in 1945. Membership dwindled over the years as veterans aged. The last large reunion was held in 2010 on the 70th anniversary. By 2015, fewer than 100 Dunkirk veterans remained alive. Number 94. The last known British survivor of Dunkirk, Albert Vic Viner, died in 2021 at age 104. He had been a Royal Artillery gunner. He returned to Dunkirk multiple times for commemorations. In his final years, he spoke to school children about his experiences, ensuring the memory would outlive those who lived it. Number 95. The last known French survivor of Dunkirk, Léon Gautier, died in 2023 at age 100. He went on to join the Free French Forces and participated in the D-Day landings with the Kiefer commandos. His life traced the arc of France's war, from defeat at Dunkirk to victory in Normandy. Number 96. The beaches of Dunkirk today are peaceful tourist destinations. Families build sandcastles where soldiers once huddled under bombardment. The harbour handles cargo ships and ferries. The town has been rebuilt. Only memorials, museums, and the Commonwealth war graves remind visitors of what happened. Number 97. The Dunkirk Memorial for the Missing lists 4,528 names of soldiers with no known grave. It stands near the harbour, visible from the beaches. Each name represents a life that ended in the water, on the sand, or in the fighting around the town. Most were under 25 years old. Number 98. Metal detectorists still find artifacts on Dunkirk beaches: bullets, shell fragments, personal items, dog tags. French authorities prohibit removing them. Unexploded ordnance is occasionally discovered. The beaches remain contaminated with the debris of war 84 years later. Number 99. Military historians debate whether Germany could have prevented the evacuation. Counter-arguments suggest that even without the Halt Order, German forces would have struggled to break through determined resistance in difficult terrain. The Luftwaffe's failure to stop the evacuation revealed limitations that Hitler refused to acknowledge. Number 100. Churchill's warning proved prophetic. Wars are not won by evacuations, but Britain's survival depended on the army's survival. Without Dunkirk, Britain would have had no trained soldiers, no experienced officers, no army to defend against invasion or eventually return to France. The evacuation bought time. Time to rebuild, rearm, and eventually prevail. Number 101. Between May 26 and the 4th of June 1940, 338,226 soldiers were carried across 26 miles of water by 933 ships of every size and type under constant air attack. They left behind their vehicles, their weapons, and 68,000 of their comrades, but they carried home something more important: the nucleus of an army that would return 4 years later to liberate France. The beaches were empty by dawn on June 4. The war was far from over. It had barely begun.